Young folks, old folks, everybody come to Kids Club and have a lot of fun. Please check your chewing gum and raisins at the door, and we'll tell you Bible stories that you never heard before. Hello, children. I'm Pastor Ted. Get ready. I'm going to read the Bible. You're going to hear a story.
This Bible story is about Esther. Esther was a little girl. She grew up to become a young woman, and then she became Queen of Persia. And as queen, she did something brave and heroic. The story doesn't begin with Esther. It actually begins with King Ahasuerus. We also know him as Xerxes I, who was the emperor of ancient Persia. Ancient Persia used to be where Iran is today. Now, King Ahasuerus threw a party for his buddies. And all of these men drank too much wine, and they began laughing when nothing was funny and slapping each other on the backs and butts. And then somebody says, King Ahasuerus, you have such a beautiful wife. The queen's name was Vashti. Tell Queen Vashti to come out wearing only her crown so we can see how beautiful she is. So the king sent a messenger. The messenger was called a eunuch. And the messenger went to Queen Vashti and said, Your drunken husband, the king, and all of his drunken friends want you to come out and dance for them wearing only your crown. She says, You mean no clothes? That's right, just your crown. No way, I won't do anything like that. That's lewd, that's lascivious, and I'm Queen Vashti. I wouldn't dare do anything like that. You tell the king no. So the messenger went back and told the king no. Vashti refuses. And the king says, Nobody refuses the king. I am all powerful. You tell Vashti that she is no longer queen. Pack her suitcases and move back with her mother. And when the king told all of his drunken friends about this, they said, Good going, king. You don't let a woman spout off to her husband like that. Why, if the word got out that your wife disobeyed you, the wives all over Persia would disobey their husbands. And so they all congratulated the king on being so stern and so legalistic as to get rid of Queen Vashti. Poor Queen Vashti now had to go back home to her family. Well, this is the point now where Esther enters the story. Esther was an orphan, but she was raised by her uncle Mordecai, and her uncle Mordecai was an excellent father for her. He took the best care of her. And Esther had become a beautiful young woman. The king, in the meantime, was lonely because he didn't have a queen, and so he asked advice from people in his court, such as Bigthan and Teresh and other people in his court, what he should do, and they advised that he have a beauty contest, that the beautiful young women who live in the capital city would parade before him, and if he found one that he liked, he could invite her to marry him and become the queen. Well, the king thought this was a pretty good idea, and so the word went out that the beauty contest would take place. Mordecai whispers in the ear of Esther, You're so beautiful. Why don't you enter this beauty contest and see if you get selected as queen. Oh, I'm too shy, she says. Oh, no, don't be shy, because this just might be an opportunity for you to become great. So, the beauty contest was held. The beautiful women walked before the king. And when the king saw the beautiful Esther, he said, I would like to invite you, Esther, to become my queen. She had to think about it, asked Mordecai, her uncle, for advice. He said, yes, say yes, say yes. And so the king welcomed Esther into the palace court with great pomp and ceremony, and she became the queen of all Persia. Well, the story doesn't end there. Oh, no. There's lots more to come. Uncle Mordecai wanted to be certain that the king and his court would treat his niece Esther well, and so he would on some days go and sit by the gate that people passed through when they were going in and out of the palace, and the delivery trucks that were delivering bread and wine and other kinds of food, and also the garbage trucks that were coming out with refuse. And of course the king's servants would come back and forth, and Mordecai would say, well, how is Queen Esther doing today? And then they would tell him all the gossip, and Mordecai stayed up to date. Well, one night, when Mordecai was sitting by the gate in the dark, he overheard a conversation by Bigthan and Teresh, two of the highest officers in the king's court, and they were plotting to assassinate Ahasuerus the king. We call this information intelligence, military intelligence, and so Mordecai the next day made an appointment to see his niece Queen Esther and told him about the plot. And Esther went and told the king, who got really angry, and he ordered that Bigthan and Teresh be arrested and hung as punishment for their assassination plot and treason. Well, everybody in the kingdom was frightened, but they understood the king's justice. But now the king needed to replace them with somebody who could run the affairs of Persia, and so he hired a guy named Haman. And he appointed Haman to be vizier or viceroy. And Haman would become the second most powerful person in the whole empire of Persia. Oh, Haman was a megalomaniac, and he liked this. And so everywhere Haman went, he would demand that people bow down and kiss his feet and kiss his ring and compliment him on how important he was. So as Haman was walking out the gate of the palace, Mordecai happened to be sitting there. And he walked right past, and Mordecai did nothing. And Haman leaned down and said, Mordecai, you're supposed to bow down and kiss my feet and kiss my ring. And Mordecai says, I don't do that. I'm a Jew. You are a Persian. I don't bow down to anybody other than God or sometimes the king, but not to you. You're only a viceroy. Oh my gosh, did Haman get hot under the collar? He was so angry. He said, Mordecai, you're a Jew. I'm just mad at you, and I'm mad at all your kind. And so Haman went stomping back into the palace, and he got King Ahasuerus' attention, and he said, I got to tell you something about these Jews. Now, let's do a little bit about a background. A decade or two earlier, before there was a Persia, there was a Babylonia, and the Babylonians had captured Jerusalem and captured two tribes, Benjamin and Judah, and carried them back to Babylonia as slaves. And then Babylonia fell to Persia, and the Persians inherited the Jews that were living among them in servitude. And so Haman took advantage of this and said, "King, don't trust the Jews. They're insurrectionists. They're assassinating. They're planning to assassinate you." And he says, "I need the power to exterminate the Jews." That extermination of the Jews is called a pogrom. And the king said, "Okay, you have the power." And he wrote it down on a scroll. And so Haman went out to all of the provinces and said, "We are going to find a day on which we are going to kill all of the Jews." Well, what day should that be? Well, they cast lots. That's sort of like throwing dice. And the day came to be the 14th of the next month. Well, in the meantime, Mordecai makes an appointment with his niece, Esther, and says, "Esther, the worst possible thing could happen. Haman plans on exterminating all the Jews, and he'll kill me, he'll kill our family, and he will kill you. The fact that you're the queen doesn't mean you will escape. You have got to persuade the king to stop this before it starts." "Oh," she said, "but I'm so shy, and you know that the king doesn't like anybody to talk to him without an appointment." And Mordecai says, "But you must. You're the only person who can save the Jews from extinction." "Well, okay," says Esther. So Esther asks for a meeting with the king, but now she's got to be really clever. What's she gonna do? Imagine that you are Esther, thinking that she dare not disobey the king, right? Remember, when Vashti the queen disobeyed the king, she was expelled. Remember that when Mordecai disobeyed the vizier Haman, the vizier obtained an edict to put Mordecai and all the other Jews to death. So whatever Esther does, she cannot disobey the king. Another problem is Esther is a Jew, and the king doesn't even know that she is a Jew. What will happen when the king finds out? She needs to be clever. She needs to be charming. She needs a solution to this problem that will prevent the Jews from being harmed, and she needs the king to make that decision. What will Esther do? Esther decided to pray and to ask God for guidance. And she asked all of the other Jews in the capital city of Susa to pray with her for 3 days. And after 3 days, she knew what she was going to plan. She stopped praying and she went into action. She went to visit King Ahasuerus, and she said, "King, just remind me, do you like me?" "Oh, yes, I love you," said the king. "Would you do me a favor?" she asked. I would do anything you ask of me. In fact, if you wanted it, I would give you half of my kingdom. I love you so much. Okay, let me invite you, good king, to the Queen's chambers for dinner tomorrow night. Special dinner. I'll have the cooks cook something really special. And bring Haman with you. Invite Haman on my behalf. Would you do that, please? Oh, yes, said the king. I look forward to our dinner. And the king invited Haman. Well, when Haman got this invitation, he went home to his wife Zeresh, and he says, I'm going to have a special dinner with the king and the queen. Zeresh says, well, why don't you execute Mordecai before that happens? Okay, so Haman and his henchmen, they create a gallows. They're going to hang Mordecai and put him to death the next day. That night, King Ahasuerus had a hard time sleeping. He tossed and he turned, and he finally decided he'd get up and do some reading. A lot of people, when they're having trouble sleeping, will do some reading. And he woke up, the scribe, the secretary, in the middle of the night and says, would you please give me the notes, the log for what's happened over the last 30 days? I'll read that. So as the king was reading the notes, he came to that little incident where Bigthan and Teresh had plotted to assassinate him, and he noticed something he had overlooked before, namely, the person who gave the intelligence, who foiled the plot. His name was Mordecai. My gosh, said the king, Mordecai is the one who saved my life and rescued the kingdom, and I never said thank you. Oh, I must do something extravagant. So the king went about eating his breakfast and his morning chores. In the meantime, Haman and his henchmen had gone to the palace to find Mordecai, to arrest him and take him back and execute him, put him to death. And when the king heard that Haman was in the vicinity, he sent a messenger, tell Haman to come on in here. I need his advice. So Haman came in, and the king said, Haman, help me think through something. I've got somebody very special in the kingdom here, somebody who has helped preserve the kingdom, helped save my life. I want to celebrate this person and say thank you. Now, Haman, if you were me, what would you do? Now, Haman, remember, he's a megalomaniac. Haman thinks the king is talking about him. And so Haman says, well, king, what I would do is I would take one of your mighty steeds, one of your great king's horses, and put this person on the back of that horse and put on top of him a robe, one of the king's robes that you've already worn. Of course, Haman thinks he's going to be the one who gets to ride on the horse in the king's robe. And the king says, thank you, Haman. That's a really good idea. It is Mordecai who is the one that I want to thank. And Haman, would you mind making the arrangements for this parade and putting Mordecai on that horse in my robe, and so all the kingdom can celebrate what a good man Mordecai is? Oh, Haman. Oh, can you imagine how he felt then? Oh, my gosh. But Haman did what he was told, and Mordecai got his parade and rode on the king's horse. So now it was getting time for the evening dinner. Yes, what would happen when Queen Esther, King Ahasuerus, and Haman would have dinner together? During the dinner, Esther asked the question, "O King Ahasuerus, do you like me?" Oh, and this prompted the king to remember. "Yes, of course, Queen Esther, I love you." "And what was that request? You had a petition for me? You want me to do something for you?" "Yes," she said. "King, you should know that I'm a Jew. Mordecai, my uncle, is a Jew, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Jews living in Persia. And one of your officials has declared that they all be murdered, that all the Jews in Persia be extinguished." "What?" said the king. "What am I hearing? Who is it that is going to execute this awful pogrom?" And Esther pointed to Haman and said, "Haman, your vizier, is planning this." And the king got angry, and he left for a minute to check to see if these facts were true. And when he came back, he saw that Haman had attacked Queen Esther. And he said, "My goodness, not only would Haman condemn all the Jews, but even my wife, the queen." And he ordered that Haman be taken out and hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. And then Esther said, "Please sign an edict that will reverse the previous edict and spare the lives of all the Jews in Persia." And King Ahasuerus appointed Mordecai to take Haman's job and to write that edict. And immediately the edict went out to all of Persia, and the lives of the Jews were spared, and everyone celebrated. And this celebration has a name. It's called Purim. It is the festival of the lots. Remember, the date for Purim was set by throwing dice, by casting lots. And so down to the present day, Jews all over the world, sometime in March, they celebrate the festival of Purim, and they remember Esther, the little girl who grew up to become a woman and queen, and who saved the Jewish people from extinction. Now, Esther is quite a heroine for you and me to remember, isn't she?
Young folks, old folks, everybody come to Kids Club and have a lot of fun. Please check your chewing gum and raisins at the door, and we'll tell you Bible stories that you never heard before. Goodbye, kids.